Mm.
Okay. Well, maybe I can just, yeah, I can get started and then I'll just, I'll see when people like join in. So if I see that people have joined in, there's a couple of interactive things. If no one joins in, I'll just say, think about this or whatever. But if people join in, I'll ask them to
Perfect.
participate.
Awesome. Let me know if you need anything.
Okay. Are we recording?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Awesome. Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me here and for watching this webinar today. Thanks, Ashley, for hosting and for Yana Mom for having me. I'm really glad that you're watching this. This presentation is for parents of babies that are around 7 to 10 months old. You've probably already started solids, hopefully already started solids, and then now ready for some like kind of next step guidance and making sure you're on track. So I created this presentation just to serve as that checkpoint to help you or to get you on track, or to help you stay on track with helping your baby's progress with their feeding and their development too. So this is stage is when a lot of parents wonder like, oh wait, am I doing it right? Am I setting them up right? And so I'm really glad you're here. I'm going to be here to reassure and guide you and maybe redirect you if needed, and that all of that is okay. A lot of what I share talks about goals for what ideally your baby will have reached by the time that they are 8 to 9 months old. But if you're here and you're watching this and your baby is 10 months old, you are still in the right place because you still want to make sure that your baby has met those. And I'll give you some tips on how to kind of get back on track if they're not quite there yet. So let's get started. A little bit more about me here. So, I'm Dana, the dietitian and the founder of the Family Nutrition Pro. I'm a mom of two kids. So, my kids are 10 and 7 years old. And I've been teaching about infant nutrition for about 8 years now. Over the past 8 years, my course has evolved based on just my personal and my professional experiences, as well as all the research that continues to come out around infant nutrition. But one thing always remains constant, and that's my desire to remove parents' stress around feeding their babies. So I've now moved everything online because I think it's a lot easier to access, right? Like if you're watching this recorded webinar, it's probably easier for you to watch the recording than be there live. So I've turned all of my courses into online courses that parents can watch on demand. So that one thing I think makes it a lot easier. I've also split everything up. So I used to teach one big infant nutrition course that covered everything from the very start of starting solids all the way up till 1 year old. And I think it's a little bit easier when we tease it out and make it into like bite-sized pieces. So I've split everything up. I've also added some like, live support, like ongoing support where my live classes didn't have that before. And now parents can also get their peer support. So there's a lot more to it, and I'm really just glad to be able to provide that for everyone. But I also do one-to-one visits. So, not everyone is like kind of fits into the like general recommendations category. And so sometimes it is necessary to provide some more individualized care. And I do all of that virtually too. So none of my patients have to leave their home in order to get the care that I provide. I am a registered dietitian, a board certified specialist in pediatric nutrition, and a certified lactation counselor. So, I'm doing what I love, and I really love being a part of the Yana Mom community and being able to provide all this information for you. So, as you can see on the screen here, my mission is not just to improve people's physical health, but also, and really more importantly, their mental health and how they connect with food. So, we know that having positive interactions and connections with over food with family members is linked to reduced risky behaviors, eating disorders, and even up to like suicidal ideation among older kids and teens. So I like to start at the very beginning whenever possible and help families set the foundation now so that you can reduce all of those risks as much as possible through food and through mealtime. And so that's what I'm here to help with. So let's dive in. But before we do, I want you to start thinking about how things are going right now. So, um, if you want to think about like, well, you know how old your baby is. And I don't have anyone here live right now, so I won't be able to respond to anyone right here. But think about like, what are you loving about offering your baby food right now? What are you loving? And then also, what are your biggest challenges? So I'll give you a second to think about that. And you can write them down on your own. What I realized very early on in this, crazy game of parenting is that we have so much judgment placed on us. And if you've met me before, you've heard me talk about this. It's like the one thing that it like just irks me. I'm like, we have enough pressure as it is raising our babies, and it's enough of a struggle as it is. We don't need the extra pressure of other parents and other people, non-parents even, judging us with every decision we make. It just makes us overwhelmed, and it makes it really hard to tune in to what feels right for you and what feels right for your family. So I'm really big on like tuning into what feels good for you. So I want you to notice kind of that. And that's why I was asking like what are you loving and what are your biggest challenges right now? Thinking about it for you, not just for like what you feel like you're supposed to do based on like what your friends are doing or what social media says. I really want you to stop searching for bits and pieces of online information and stop comparing to your friends. A lot of times, um, the pressure that we feel might even be like perceived pressure or judgment, and we don't know if anyone's judging us. So just let's let that go and really tune into like what feels right in your family. I want you to also picture how you want your older infant to approach food as they become a toddler and then grow into a young child. So, do you want them to confidently try new foods? Do you want them to accept your cultural foods? Is it important that everyone laughs together at the table and there's not a lot of like fighting and conflict at the table? So, I'll explain, as I go through all the tips today, I'm going to explain how all of those will impact some of those goals that I just mentioned, and, I might hopefully touch on some that are important to you as well. So today, even if you came on here like feeling really still like nervous or unsure or overwhelmed about feeding your baby, I want you to walk away feeling a little more confident and more excited to take those challenges that you've noticed and really take them head on and start working through the ways that you can help your baby progress into an independent eater, which is really what we want. And now is the time to start that process. So this is another thing that you may have heard me talk about before if you know me. This phrase, food before one, is just for fun. So if anyone has heard that before, I don't like that phrase. I do agree with where the phrase started, is with good intentions, and it's rooted in the idea that we don't need to worry or stress over how much food our babies are eating. Absolutely agree with that 100%. But it is for so much more than just fun. And we do a major disservice to babies and honestly to parents too by spreading this phrase. So I like to kind of start here so that if you've heard that, you can understand that food before one is for so much more than just fun. And we can start learning some really important skills that you can help your baby develop now. When we forget about some of these like important milestones that we need to help our babies get to, that's when we can see a lot of, problems coming up. We see growth concerns and some things like brain development, the way our brain cells are formed, if the proper nutrients aren't there, some of those are irreversible. And so we want to make sure we touch on everything now. And so these are the four pillars of what food before one is for. So, yes, it's for fun, and that's actually included in one of these. And based on research, it is also for nutrient density, right? We want to make sure that we're providing our babies with foods that have the proper nutrients that help their brain develop, most importantly, our babies' brains go through so much important and intense development all the way up until 2 years old. So we want to provide the nutrients that primes them for that. We also want to make sure that we're introducing allergens early and often so that we can reduce the risk of food allergies for babies. And the next one is boosting babies' confidence. So this is a little bit of like where the fun comes in, right? When a baby's having fun interacting with food, they're showing you that they're confident. And we want to foster that. We want to make sure that we allow them to engage with the food in a way that feels best for them. We're going to talk about that today with self-feeding. So, mealtime can be a really good time to boost baby's confidence and to build their relationship with not just food, but also with you. Because hopefully you're eating around, at the same time as them, or some adult is eating with them, and that's a good time for bonding as well. It's also for exploration and learning. So, exploration and learning encompasses everything about like building coordination and strength and the motor skills that they're going to need in all the other areas in their life. They get to practice those skills at the table. Maybe they even get to perfect them or hone them at the table so that then they could carry into the rest of their life and be able to have like the fine motor skills they need and the hand-eye coordination. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit too. So it's kind of exciting to realize that the actions that you take right now are going to impact your baby's brain and development and their eating behaviors forever. It might feel a little stressful too, but I want to make sure you understand that, like, that it's putting in the effort and learning how to do things really well with your baby's meals right now is going to pay off for the rest of their life. That's the foundation that you're setting. So it's not to add extra pressure when I say that, it's really to say, like, great job for being here. You're cultivating that positive relationship with food for your baby, and you're opening up the doors for more connection time with you and your baby. So we're not going to be able to go in depth into all four of these pillars today, but we are going to go through some of those like checkpoints, some of those goals and milestones that we ideally want to see baby having developed by the time they're around 8 to 9 months old. So here are some of them. Most this is like basically the kind of like the top 9 that we want to make sure. So chewing a variety of textures, self-feeding most of the time, generally eating the same foods that you eat, right? Sitting at the table and y'all can like have a family meal and your baby's eating, it doesn't have to be baby food. All of the top 9 allergens should have been introduced with intention. If your baby is in this range of like 7 to 10 months, well, 7 months, I'm like, usually during that 7 to 8 month window is when you like finish getting through them. When you follow like my framework that gets through them pretty quickly and safely. But if you're nearing 10 months old and there are any of those top 9 allergens that your baby has not tried yet, that is, you want to get right on top of that. I'm not going to go into that today because that's like a more in-depth topic that I don't want to like miss pieces of information because that can be a risk for everybody. So I do have that in my online course though. So being offered food twice per day, nearly every day. That's definitely by the time your baby's 8, 9 months old, we want to be in that pattern where they get those food experiences a couple of times a day. That'll give them just more opportunities to try more foods and to get more nutrition, and it gets them used to being at the table. Playing with food regularly, allow your baby to play with food is so, so important. Mimicking your eating behaviors, and that's where you come in, that role modeling, so that you can show them, if they're struggling with getting something in their mouth or taking a bite of something, you're there, you've got similar food, you can show them exactly what to do, and then they mimic. Practicing, not perfecting, but practicing using utensils and cups. Again, that's a topic that we don't have time for today, but I do teach that in detail in my online program. And then receiving 2 good sources of iron per day. That goes back to like being offered food at least twice per day. Iron's one of the nutrients of concern for babies. Now, if your baby is 10 months old, I mentioned this in the beginning, if they're 10 months old and they're missing any of these accomplishments, do not panic. It's okay. Babies, many babies can catch right up. Like if you, okay, now we know to do this, and you go right back and you start offering these foods, they can catch right up. But sometimes they're going to need some extra support, and that's all right. But you won't know they need support until you challenge them and kind of offer them the next steps. And so I'm going to give you some strategies to try today Even if you haven't at 10 months, you can try these strategies. And then if they're 10 months and they are struggling, that's when you know they might need some extra support. And my contact information is on the final slide. You can contact me, you can contact their pediatrician just to find out if they do need extra support for any of those. Today, we're going to go through just these first three, and I'm going to give you some good tips on like how to progress through these. And then we'll talk about at the end, like what's next. So if your baby is 10 months old or 9 months old and they've already accomplished all of these, we will go over towards the end, like what's coming up for you. So first one on the list was chewing a variety of textures. This chewing at this stage is critical. There's a window of time where babies are primed and ready to learn how to chew food. And if you wait too long, if you wait like past that window, your baby's going to be at a greater risk. It's not a certain risk, but like a much greater risk of developing oral motor difficulties, meaning like trouble with chewing. I also just want to say that, like, with oral motor difficulty is like a big word, but what that looks like at the table is a baby that just isn't interested in eating, or a baby that cries and like freaks out every time they get to in their high chair because they're frustrated. Or you might notice that like they're really not swallowing anything, but if they're 9, 10 months old and there's like they're just spitting everything out, it looks like that might be something like an oral motor problem. So that's what that looks like at the table. Um, Allowing and encouraging and offering foods for your baby to chew earlier on is going to help them get that skill so that they don't end up with those problems. Sometimes they still do. And sometimes, I've actually had a patient that came in at 11 months old. Mom brought baby in and they hadn't done any chewing yet. And I basically said, well, you need to start chewing food and kind of walk them through this. And they went home and everything was great. Now baby like eats all the food. So sometimes every baby's individual. So that learning to chew window starts closing around 9 months old. And so, as scary as it might feel for some of you, if you haven't allowed your baby to chew any food yet, it's important that you know that as long as your baby is normally developing with no issues so far, you do need to start taking the next steps with food. And if you're not sure, always talk with their pediatrician to find out if the pediatrician thinks that they're ready for chewing or have any difficulties there. So this is a chart of various textures in order from like easiest to most difficult to chew. Now, I will say this, these are not like, you don't have to go in order, right? There's no prerequisites here. This is for your comfort level, right? So, for example, purees are not a prerequisite. If you've learned from me about starting solids, like with the starting solids preparation course, you don't have to start with purees. You absolutely can, but it's not a must, right? That's just one example. So, like, your baby might start on mashed, and then if you've been really confident with it, like maybe they go right to some like multiple solids or firm chewables. You can mix it up. But if you're afraid and you're like not sure what to do and your baby's only eating purees or maybe some like mashed foods every once in a while, this chart is going to help you take the next little baby step, excuse the pun, the next baby step to get them closer to where they're chewing more difficult textures. So, it's definitely less intimidating that way. And also, I want to encourage you and remind you that most, well, all, we're going to say all, full term, normally developing babies have the reflexes to be able to chew at or soon after 6 months. So if you're in this like 8-month-old age range, like rest assured, as long as they meet those criteria, full term, normally developing, they're ready for it. They've got the reflexes that they need and they're well equipped to chew. So they really just need to be given some practice. So let me see here. I'm going to start going through these just to give you a good idea of like what these are. And then I'll come back to like describing a little bit more. So purees is anything that's blended in a blender. It's like almost like a liquidy texture. You give it on a spoon. That's a pureed food. It's a uniform texture throughout. Mashed would be like, think of like mashed bananas. if you mash them up enough, they get almost to that puree texture. They're almost like liquefied, but they're just a little bit thicker. Thick mashed would be like mashed potatoes or mashed beans. Like you could smash up beans that are well cooked and they get that like thick mashed into like a little pile. Soft mashable pieces would be like a slice of ripe avocado that's mashable in baby's mouth, but it's not already mashed for them. Then we get into ground, and I don't know if any of you have those little grinder thingies that you can put, like you can grind up, already cooked meat. You can grind up anything. I used to work with a daycare that had one of those, and they would like grind up like little fig bars, for the older kids that had feeding difficulties. Like they would grind up everything. So you could put anything in there to make a ground texture. But in real life, like if you don't have one of those, ground beef or like small pieces of like tofu crumbles, that would be like ground texture also. Um, and then meltable solids. Now this one's a little bit surprising. So we think of those like yogurt, the yogurt melts or whatever, the Gerber melts as like meltable. Those are actually not truly meltable. Um, Especially after the container's been opened for a little while. But even when they get them in their mouth, they like kind of just like break up into a lot of pieces. So better meltable solids would be like a graham cracker. Graham crackers are awesome actually because they have the crunch when baby bites into them. But once they get it wet in their mouth, it turns into a really nice like one little bowl. It's like one small circle pile of food that's really makes it easier for them to manipulate in their mouth. So I love graham crackers, but do be careful because with your baby not being 1 year old yet, they cannot have honey. So don't get the honey graham crackers. Get the ones that are labeled as like vegan, or just make sure honey is not listed as an ingredient on the graham cracker. Ritz crackers are kind of similar. Um, so you also think about like if you take toast and you soak it into a soup, that's kind of like a meltable solid. Firm chewables would then be like meatballs or toast that's not soaked in something, like blanched or roasted vegetables like carrots that are just they have like a little bit of firmness to them. And then you have your crispy or crunchy, which it would be like, raw bell pepper strips or even like chips, like tortilla chips or something like that. All right, so now we know what those textures are. And if if your baby seems to be struggling like along the way, you're trying to move through these, and that might be a reason to reach out for help. And especially if they're on the older end, like closer to that 10-month age, and they really don't seem to be getting it with the chewing, like, and they haven't been introduced to chewable foods so far, there's no harm in reaching out for help. There's everything good with that. And early intervention is out there for support for all families. Feeding therapy is not really my expertise, but most babies with oral motor difficulties are able to make fantastic progress and catch right up when they're working with like an occupational therapist or a speech therapist. That would be like what's offered in early intervention. So the sooner you can get help, the better. And just a quick note that if moving forward in these textures terrifies you to the point that you cannot emotionally handle taking that next step, then it's a great time to take stock of where that fear is coming from. Get an assessment for your child. Like if you feel like that your baby actually like has something going on that they can't do it, then get them assessed. There's nothing better than getting peace of mind from those assessments or to get the help you need. But if it's coming from within, like if it's your fear, maybe you choked as a child and you have a core memory of it, or maybe your baby was in the NICU and like had all this stuff going on, they were messing with them. It's like it's traumatic for you to like take next steps of feeding. These are all great reasons to get some mental health therapy for yourself. And there is absolutely no shame in that. This is the time. The sooner that you can get that help for yourself, the sooner y'all can progress with developing those positive interactions with food at the table as a family. All right. So, self feeding. Babies love to be in charge. You probably already know that. Self feeding is a really great opportunity to give them that practice with being in charge of what they're doing. It builds that self confidence that we talked about. It's going to allow them to be more comfortable with exploring new foods as they get older, too, turning into toddler years and beyond. It also gives them like some really critical skills that they're going to need for later. So that hand-eye coordination that I mentioned, like knowing where their hand is in space and like where their mouth is and where, like, that comes from self-feeding. It allows them to be curious on their own without somebody shoving food in their mouth without their, permission, or without their guidance on it. It's fun, right? They like it. They like to have fun. So you want to allow them to self-feed. And even though it's a mess, you have to kind of get past that, because you know that they're building those skills that they're going to need. So if the mess is kind of hard for you to accept, one thing you could try is to put a clean tablecloth on the floor underneath their tray, so that when, not if, but when they throw that food on the floor, you know that you have a clean surface. You can put it right back on their tray or on their plate. So that can kind of reduce food waste. You do want to lock up the pets, right? So you don't want them to be like walking all over with their dirty paws all over that clean tablecloth. So that you have that clean, safe surface where you can pick things back up and put them on their tray. But, even with like food waste, I use my air quotes for the food waste, because if you're throwing away food in this context, it's actually still not a waste. They gained so many valuable experiences from whatever they were doing with the food, so many more than if you're putting the food in their mouth. So this is the time when you need to step back and, like, you're only putting a couple pieces of food on their tray at a time anyway. So I'm not asking you to put a whole bowl of yogurt, right? They're going to throw that across the room. We're just putting small, like a preloaded spoon of yogurt on their tray, so that they can learn to self-feed. All right, so eating the same foods you eat. Now, this one might not seem very important, but this one is actually one of the most important, because the foods that you eat are the foods that you're going to be cooking and preparing for your baby as they turn into a child and as y'all have family meals together. You want to role model and demonstrate eating those foods. You want them to see you enjoying those foods. That's going to help open up their minds to accepting those foods as they grow. So one benefit of eating the same foods that you eat is that you don't need to spend your time making extra baby food, right? Like, this is, you just make a meal and everyone gets to eat it. Now you might need to modify some of the sizes of the food if your baby's not doing the pincer grasp yet. Like, you might need to have like larger pieces of food, for one example. But so there might be some modifications, but you definitely don't need to like be spending all afternoon making like baby food in ice trays anymore. Like, this is, now is the time when they can progress. When you feed your baby, or when your baby's self-feeding and eating their own food that's ideally the same food you eat, now you can enjoy the same meal. You can focus on your food and nourish yourself while your baby is getting the experience of trying those foods. Your baby's going to get acquainted with your family flavors this way. So again, this is the food that you're going to be cooking for them. You've got a repertoire. You probably have some regular meals that are in rotation. Let's let your baby eat those. You have more freedom. Baby has more freedom, right? You don't, like, as you progress through introducing your baby to more foods and more variety, then they have those experiences. You can widen the options of what you're offering them. It is absolutely less stressful when your baby starts eating regular foods that the rest of the family is eating, because you don't have that extra time. And like, if you go out to eat, you can just put some of your food on baby's tray. Again, you want to make sure it's safe and not like doesn't have ingredients that, like, honey was, I gave that example earlier, that you don't want to be giving baby, but overall it makes it so much easier. And then more role model opportunities. Your baby is learning everything from the most important person in their life, who is you. And maybe if there's another parenting partner in their life, anytime you eat, they're taking everything in. They're learning not just like about the food, but they're watching you chew. They're watching you talk to somebody across the table, maybe, or they'll watch you, like, you take a bite and then maybe you take a sip of your water, and all the things, the little tiny decisions that you make, or maybe you dip something in something else on your plate. They're watching that. They're learning, and they're learning how to, like, be their own little citizen at the table, their own family member there, with their own independence. And that's what we want. So let's go back to these checkpoints. We just went over the first three. Hopefully you got some good ideas of how you can progress with these. I've got more in like a printed copy too, and I will send a link for y'all to be able to get that after this, everyone who registered for this. So now with the rest, these are all really important. Of course, we didn't have time to talk through all of them today. They are things that I teach in my online program if you are, if that's something that interests you. And then again, that note about like, don't panic if your baby's 10 months old and like hasn't reached some of those yet, just get on it and like start noticing how they're doing, and learning to do that properly is really key. So then what's next? So after accomplishing all those and they're moving beyond 10 months, then it's going to be where you're working on like eating more often throughout the day, building into like 3 meals a day. And then later, like balancing, all the important nutrients. You're learning how to feed another human. If this is your first child, like you're learning too. And then getting even more variety. We want to introduce as many foods and flavors as possible before your baby gets to that kind of like picky eating phase that's inevitable. But we want to get through that phase without having long lasting, impactful picky eating. We want it to just kind of be something that happens and we move forward. And the way that you can do that is by starting now with introducing a wide variety of foods, textures, flavors. And then they're going to be mastering all their self-feeding skills, right? They're going to be like, learning how to pick up smaller pieces of food, different size foods, using utensils, drinking from cups. Those are all what comes next. So if all of this was like, whoa, that's so much, I don't know how to do any of that, there is a lot of help available to you. There are so many resources out there, but I really want to encourage you to seek out reputable sources of information. So, Yana Mom, for example, like anyone that they vet everybody that gets to, work with them and work with all of you. So any of the partners here like would be providing good information, I'm pretty certain. So I'm really glad that you're here. If you're going to do, an online course or online learning, like I mentioned before, I do have an online course. I have one on starting solids that's like all the nuts and bolts and everything about the first steps of starting solids. And I have a feeding your older infant course as well. A lot of times with my feeding your older infant course, if people haven't taken my starting solids course, like there are parts that they're missing. And so everyone in my online community has access to all courses that are in the community. Everyone has access to, as long as you're members, you can go back and like, what rewatch and everything. So that's kind of nice. So I created that because I knew that parents were having trouble piecing together all the little bits and pieces of information they're seeing on, social media and online. So it really like teaches you how to put it all together and then make sure that you're setting your baby up for success for life with their eating. There are, other ways like local professionals. You can always ask pediatrician for help. There are other, I think there are other online courses. None of them are like mine, but no, there are tons of online resources. There are apps. There's all kinds of stuff out there, and there are lots of right ways to do things. So you want to make sure, like I said before, that you're tuning in with what feels right for you. So your homework now is to talk about what you learned today with your parenting partner and anyone else that is important in baby's life, that feeds them often. You want to talk through like how you want to progress. I want you to experiment with different textures. If you're stuck in one of those textures that you saw on that chart, I want you to move one step forward into the next texture and see how it goes. Eat with your baby so that you could demonstrate how to eat that food. And then give your baby opportunities to self-feed. Even if you're like, offering yogurt or something like that, like this baby's got the spoon in their mouth, give them that preloaded spoon that they can self-feed with. Put appropriately sized pieces of food on their tray. You do not want to give like an 8-month-old these tiny pieces of food. They're going to be frustrated with that. You need larger pieces that they can grab. So appropriately sized pieces of food on your baby's tray so they can self-feed. Let them make a mess. The mess is all part of the learning for them. And then enjoy. So enjoy a meal together. Your assignment, the main assignment, is for you to come up with a family meal and figure out a way, not figure out, it's usually not super hard, but you want to like, you may need to, dismantle the like, um, stir fry. You know, if you're making stir fry, separate out the different things, but like make one meal for everybody and then offer everyone the food so that baby can enjoy that food. They're self-feeding. Y'all are all eating a meal together and see how it is. It's really enjoyable once you give it a shot. And I do have a specific meal example in my like follow up, my information that you can access after this too. Okay. Well, we don't have anyone live here, so there's no questions or answers live. But I this is my contact information. Anyone that watches this recorded, you can contact me. This is my work cell phone number, so I'm not like texting people in like the middle of the night or whatever. If you have a question for me, I generally answer them during work hours. But this is a cell phone number, and you can text me if you have questions or want to stay in touch for whatever in whatever way. Emailing me works too. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at The Family Nutrition Pro. That's my website also, thefamilynutritionpro.com. And I do